But recently, cameras around the world have captured enormous human-like figures walking out from caves and remote mountain openings. Some clips were explained away. Others only made the mystery feel even more real.
Oh my god. It has one eye. No way.
Crossing through the mountains, a hiker glanced up at the rocky ridge and froze. An old man stood at the top, tall, white-haired, draped in a dark robe. Stranger still was his staff. The tip burned blue. He stood completely motionless, watching below. The moment a camera pointed upward, something shifted. The old man noticed. He turned and disappeared within seconds, leaving nothing but empty rock. No path up. No sound, no explanation for how someone could still vanish that fast. Woman giant. From a narrow cave opening carved into the mountainside, a large humanoid figure gradually emerged. Long-haired, shaped like a woman, but enormous. It stepped out calmly, never glancing back, and walked away in its own direction. Its shape read human at first look, but the movement felt wrong somehow. The cave itself was the other problem. Nothing that size should fit inside, let alone live there quietly. That detail alone is why the footage keeps resurfacing. People watch it once and find themselves watching it again. Cave encounter. A group of hikers reached the mountain summit, and someone pointed across to the opposite face. A large cave had been cut into the rock. Then a tall figure stepped out from the darkness and planted itself right at the entrance, fully visible. No gear, no explanation. Just standing there in the open, like the mountain belonged to it. A creature that size had no reason to be inside a cave, and yet the hikers stood there watching it, and none of them had anything close to an answer. Wrong shape. A man walked deeper into the woods than intended. When exhaustion set in, he spotted a cave and moved toward it. Then something stepped out. Pale, thin, and enormous arms hanging too low, proportions that matched no normal person. It stood there without urgency. The man stopped, reversed course, and left the way he came without looking back. He never reached the cave. Whatever had been resting inside it remained behind, standing at that entrance. The shape of it alone was enough. Some places stop being worth exploring the moment they answer back. Nevada figure. Recording landscape footage in the Rocky Nevada hills, an expert spotted something unexpected on the ridge above. A giant figure stood there draped in something dark, head bearing strange protrusions that suggested horns.
Dios mío. Pensé que ya no existían. ¿Lo ven, chicos?
Body built wide and heavy. It lingered a moment, seemingly watching the ground below. Then it jumped straight off the ledge and vanished into the rocks without hesitation. No scrambling, no stumbling, just a clean, confident drop. The terrain seemed completely familiar to it. Whatever it was, those hills moved under it like home ground. Giant winged creature. No location, source, or context attached. The clip was filmed through heavy snowfall, with visibility reduced to shapes and outlines. At the center of the blizzard stood a giant white figure, robed, hooded, unmistakably large. Spread across its back were two enormous wings, fully open against the storm. The snow and fog softened the details without erasing them. The silhouette remained. Whether the figure belonged to something ancient or something beyond current understanding, the blizzard framed it without offering anything close to an explanation. Cliff face. Most dismiss giants as myth, but footage like this unsettles that confidence. A large figure with long hair and a beard stepped out from a cave cut directly into a rocky cliff face. No hesitation, no confusion, it moved with clear purpose, heading straight toward the tree line below as though hunting. The cave, the ledge, the surrounding woods, none of it looked unfamiliar to the creature. It had been living there quietly, completely out of sight, and nobody knew until this footage appeared. Whatever found that cave found it long ago. 1992 Valley. The footage is from 1992, shot on a handheld camcorder in a remote mountain valley. A giant moves slowly across open ground, estimated to be near 30 feet tall. One hand drags a thick, heavy rope behind it. Old, torn fabric shifts with every step. The scale of it against the surrounding rock and ground removes any comfortable doubt. Nobody has identified who filmed it or where exactly it was taken. The giant was crossing open terrain without urgency, as if it had somewhere to be. Whether it still does remains an open question. Giant figures. No source attached, no explanation offered. The footage shows two giant figures moving through open ground at the forest edge. One is heavily built with long hair, an axe hanging loose in its hand, walking as if the land belongs to it. The other is pale and moves differently, something slightly off in the way it carries itself. The two travel side by side, unhurried, as though following a shared purpose through the trees. Viewers who watched it landed in completely different places. Some believed these two had been out there together for years, others simply had nothing to say. Pale creature. A group of kids in Indonesia was spending the day near a stream by a waterfall when movement on the opposite bank caught their attention. A pale creature crouched at the tree line, slowly edging into the open. It matched nothing familiar from that area. The kids didn't wait for a clearer look, they ran. When locals heard about it afterward, they had nothing to compare it to. No similar sighting had ever been reported there before. Whatever had been crouching at that bank had apparently kept itself hidden until that afternoon. Humanoid figure. A photographer hiked a Russian mountain specifically to shoot the sunset from the top. The view was delivered. But reviewing the footage later, something on a separate peak caught his attention. A dark figure stood alone at the summit, human in shape, but scaled too large for any person. The distance swallowed the details and left only a silhouette. No trail reaches that peak. No hikers go up there. Yet something was standing at the top of it, completely still, in the same frame as a quiet sunset that had seemed unremarkable until that moment. Forest giant. A group of tourists camping in the forests of North Carolina expected quiet trees and open air. Instead, between the trunks, a towering humanoid figure rose far above the forest line. It carried two enormous pieces of wood without any visible effort, moving as though the weight meant nothing. Its pale, weathered appearance didn't belong to the present, more like something from a much older time that had simply never left. The forest had been hiding it well. That night, the camping trip became something else entirely.
Mira eso, güey, allá abajo.
¿Lo estás grabando?
Unreachable cave. High on a rocky cliff face, inside a cave opening with no path leading to it, something large and white was visible. Heavy, fur-covered, wedged into a space too narrow to exit comfortably. The immediate question wasn't how it would get out, it was how it got in. No ledge, no route, no logical approach to that opening exists on that cliff. Something that size reached an unreachable place and settled inside it. Whether it found a way back out and where that exit leads remains the part nobody has answered. Kandahar Giant. Local people in Kandahar, Afghanistan, have spoken about a specific cave for hundreds of years, describing a massive giant living inside it. One explorer chose to verify it himself. He walked to the entrance and pointed his camera into the darkness. That was when it appeared tall, thin, heavily bearded, stepping out from the shadows and staring directly into the lens. The explorer turned around and left without hesitation. Given what had just stepped forward from that darkness, the decision required very little thought. Hill figure. In a small Brazilian village, people began gathering in the street and looking up. At the top of the rocky hill above the rooftops stood a giant figure, completely still, looking out over everything below. Nobody climbed up. Nobody moved closer. The crowd watched from the street until the figure turned and withdrew into the trees behind the hill. The village has been talking about it since. Many locals hold the same quiet conviction that it was watching for a reason, and that it will return. Forest sighting. A woman walking through a snowy forest in China noticed a figure standing between the trees ahead, tall, dark, and completely motionless. Its shape matched no animal or person she could place.
I'm loading up wood, and I look up, and this is what I see. Wait for it.
She kept her distance and turned back toward the tree line. When she came out the other side, she struggled to describe what she had seen. Not from lack of memory, the image stayed clearly. She simply had no name for whatever had been standing still in the snow, watching the space between the trees as it belonged there. Headless runner. In a deserted open area, a man filmed something crossing the ground at speed. The figure appeared headless, its upper body patched with fur, moving fast, as though covering distance with purpose. The way it ran didn't match the terrain, too fluid, too directed. The man held the camera steady as it went, tracking it until the figure disappeared behind a rocky slope and the frame went empty. Whatever had been running out there left no obvious explanation behind, just open ground and the place where it had been. Cliff being. Recording the mountain view from below, a man noticed something dark moving along the top of a cliff edge and kept the camera on it. A dark figure moved at the very rim of the rock face, no trail up, no logical reason for anything to be there. The cliff was too high and too remote for anyone to follow up and investigate. What it was doing at that edge is impossible to say. It moved without urgency, as though the height meant nothing. Whatever it was that day, it has never been identified. Bigfoot sighting. Deep in a remote Alberta valley, a giant, dark figure crossed an open hillside between the trees. Upright, steady, each stride far wider than any normal person could manage. It didn't pause or look around, just moved through the landscape with a clear direction. Alberta has carried Bigfoot reports for decades, most of them dismissed without much consideration. This footage resists that response. The figure crossing that valley was real. It was enormous, and it covered ground the way something covers ground when it has walked that same route many times before. Tall humanoid. Harvey was filming the mountains in Aguascalientes, Mexico, at sunset when the footage caught something on a remote peak. A tall humanoid figure stood alone against the orange sky at the very top. No trail, no company, no explanation for its presence there. People who watched it struggled to reason it away cleanly. Some called it a giant outright. Others reached further back, pointing to ancient texts and descriptions of Nephilim enormous beings, said to have walked the earth in an earlier age. The figure stood still against the fading light, offering nothing either way. Sasquatch or Dogman. Reports of strange creatures have been growing globally, and this footage from a forested mountain area added to that pattern. A giant dark figure moved through the trees in a way that shifted between animal and upright, not quite matching either consistently. Viewers split immediately between Sasquatch and Dogman descriptions, each side finding details to support their read. Neither label fully resolved it. Whatever was moving through those trees seemed indifferent to the debate, covering ground at its own pace while the footage kept circulating and the numbers behind it kept climbing. Mountain Giant.
Oh, that's Bigfoot.
A large, dark figure rose upright and moved across a deserted stretch of mountainside without any sign of hurry. The terrain was rough, but the movement stayed calm and even, each step placed with the ease of something familiar with that ground. Its shape and the way it carried itself matched no known animal. The size alone made the explanation difficult. People who watched the clip reached for Bigfoot quickly, and the unhurried, natural quality of the movement gave them little reason to reconsider. Whatever crossed that mountainside did so as though it had done it many times before.
I can't believe this, it's real.
Arizona encounter. On the 20th of January, 2024, a group of friends driving near the Rocky Mountains in Arizona caught something on camera they hadn't expected. At the top of the mountain, a figure estimated to be around 9 feet tall appeared on the ridge and moved slowly across the rocky terrain. The movement was calm and unhurried, as though the altitude and exposure meant nothing. The timing and location made the footage harder to set aside. Something that size crossing an empty ridge at that pace wasn't lost. It simply had somewhere to go. Goatman encounter. A massive dark bipedal figure with horns moved slowly and steadily toward a cave entrance, its weight apparent in every step. People watching the footage online identified it quickly with Goatman descriptions, a creature said to shelter in caves. As it reached the opening, the footage darkened until only the outline remained visible. Then the figure stepped inside, and the frame went black. Whether the label fits or not, something horned and heavy had been making its way toward that cave like it knew exactly where it was going. Unknown beings. From a boat near a riverside cave, a group spotted large shapes moving in the water, hairy figures floating calmly near the bank. The sight was enough to make them hesitate before getting closer. Curiosity eventually moved them forward. The mystery dissolved quickly on approach. The giants were people in costumes, mid-scene in a short film production. What had read as something ancient and unexplained from a distance turned out to be entirely staged. The tension broke into relief. Not every strange shape near a cave entrance turns out to be worth the hesitation. Deliberate watcher. Walking through the woods, a man recorded something near a hidden cave entrance he hadn't anticipated. A bipedal shape moved slowly at the opening, the camera struggling to hold focus throughout. Its upright movement stayed clear enough. It slipped behind a tree, then lowered itself to the ground and went completely still. No sudden movement followed. No confrontation. Just that quiet, deliberate stillness, like something that had spent considerable time learning how to watch without being watched. The footage is understated, which is exactly what makes it difficult to shake afterward. Desert horns. Crossing open desert ground on two legs, a dark, heavy figure with what appeared to be upward-pointing horns moved through the frame. No source, no location, no person identified as the one who filmed it. Just a creature walking upright through open desert with a head shaped like nothing in any standard field guide. The absence of context makes it harder to dismiss, rather than easier. Something unidentified crossed that ground, and whoever held the camera had the presence of mind to keep it steady. Unsettling growls. A construction crew operating heavy equipment had no warning before it emerged. A massive grizzly bear, close to 10 feet tall on its hind legs, came out of its den disoriented and furious after being woken mid-hibernation. The growls alone were enough to stop everything. The crew found themselves sharing ground with an animal that size and in that state, confused, powerful, and not remotely interested in giving ground. It was a direct reminder of what heavy equipment disturbs when it moves into terrain that was already occupied. River encounter. Floating down a Colorado river, a group of tourists noticed something standing between the trees along the bank. A giant, dark figure, completely still, towering above the surrounding bushes. The shape, the upright posture, and the width of it matched Sasquatch descriptions precisely. The group watched from the water while it stared back from the tree line unhurried, unbothered, as though that river had always been its territory. Whatever was standing there had not stumbled into view. It had simply allowed itself to be seen. Wolf-like creature. Filming from a chairlift in Alaska during a blizzard, a tourist caught something moving through the storm below. A giant, dark figure, wide and heavily built, walking straight into the wind without slowing. Zooming in sharpened the shape broad, wolf-like, and unmistakably large. The blizzard that would stop any person meant nothing to it. The tourist watched from above, separated from it by height and weather. That distance turned out to be the only reason the encounter stayed at a comfortable distance. Strange being. Footage captured in Navajo Nation territory showed a dark creature lying flat and motionless across the rocks, resting or waiting. Then it rose and ran. Not gradually, not casually. It moved the moment it registered being seen, covering ground at a speed that matched the urgency of something that understood exposure. Nobody identified it. The Navajo Nation carries centuries of accounts describing strange beings in that land. Whether this creature belongs to those stories is a question the footage raises without answering. Peak Giant. A drone moving through a foggy mountain range filmed something standing at the very top of a rocky peak, upright, dark, and completely still through the mist. Conditions at that altitude made simple presence there difficult to explain, let alone comfort. The silhouette reads, human in shape, but not in scale.
Thing's kind of creepy. It's like a person's silhouette up in them clouds.
When the footage circulated, viewers divided along familiar lines. Some pointed to a giant living in those mountains. Others went straight to Bigfoot. The fog held its position around the figure either way, keeping the details exactly out of reach. Dark entity. Tourists in Paranoa, Brazil turned a camera toward the ridge above and found a giant dark figure walking casually along the hilltop, arms slightly out, pace unhurried, no sign of concern about being visible. They filmed it crossing the ridge until it disappeared over the other side. The ease of the movement told its own story. Whatever crossed those hills did so without hesitation, covering familiar ground at its own pace. Those hills clearly belonged to something long before anyone below thought to look up. Dashcam encounter. A worker driving a wooded road in Texas had his dash cam running without thinking much about it. Reviewing the footage later, he found what the camera had caught between the trees just off the road. A large, dark, heavily built figure standing partially behind the trunks, watching the road pass. It wasn't hiding, it wasn't moving, just standing there in the tree line while traffic went by, completely aware and completely still. The worker had no idea it was there during the drive. That gap between the moment and the discovery is what makes this one land differently. Glowing face. Deep inside a mountain cave in a remote location with no trail nearby, a dark shape appeared at the entrance. Its face caught faint light, while the rest of its body stayed swallowed in shadow. It didn't move. It seemed to be scanning the outside quietly, taking its time. The contrast was sharp, a softly lit face, surrounded by complete darkness. It held that position just long enough to be seen, then stayed still enough to raise one question nobody has cleanly answered. Whatever was inside that cave was watching first. Cold touch. A man exploring the mountains found a small cave and looked inside. Near the back stood a humanoid creature with almond-shaped eyes. Slowly, it extended its long hands toward him, not aggressively, almost like it wanted contact. Nervously, he reached out and touched one hand briefly. The moment he felt it, he ran. He said it felt nothing like human skin. That single detail stayed with him longer than anything else about the encounter. Whatever was waiting inside that cave had been close enough to touch, and that turned out to be enough. Narrow opening. A group of men exploring a forest discovered a cave and pushed deeper inside. Further in, a narrow opening broke through the rock. From within it, a humanoid figure appeared, wearing a terrifying expression. The men had no framework for what they were looking at. Authorities were contacted, the area was closed off, and the incident received no official explanation. The footage kept moving online long after, passed between people who watched it closely, and still landed in different places. Nobody ever came back with a clear answer. Cave gathering. Inside a dimly lit cave, footage captured a group of small humanoid figures gathered near the entrance. Long ears, elongated noses, and shapes that echoed the elf-like forms found across folklore. They emerged together from deeper inside while a few remained within. Their movement was slow and coordinated, the kind that suggested habit, a group long accustomed to moving as one. They paused near the opening briefly, unhurried. The setting, and their ease within it, pointed toward one quiet conclusion. That cave had not been empty for a short while. They had been there long before the camera arrived. Salt and shadow. Nobody walks into a cave expecting this. Deep inside a dim, echoing tunnel, the man spotted a dark figure standing completely still in the shadows, patient, like it had been waiting. Panicked, he started throwing what looked like salt at it, muttering to himself, hoping something would happen. Then curiosity overrode the fear. He reached out and touched it anyway. The second it felt wrong, he pulled back, and the regret was immediate. No explanation followed him out of that cave. Just the memory of what standing that close had actually felt like. Unnatural shape. The desert already carried old stories, but this clip introduced something harder to place. A tall, pale figure moved across the Portuguese sands, its shape so unnatural that viewers struggled to fit it into any familiar category. The body looked like it had no business existing in that landscape, or possibly anywhere recognizable. People immediately asked where it had come from and what it was moving toward. The desert absorbed the moment the way it absorbs everything else, without answering. One more unexplained shape crossing the ground that has always held more than people are willing to admit. Cave scream. Moving carefully through a narrow cave passage, a man noticed something ahead that stopped him. A creature with a human-like face was turned directly toward him. It opened its mouth in what looked like a scream, not out of fear, but as though delivering something. A warning, maybe. A message with no translation available. The quiet of the underground made the moment worse, stripping away any surrounding noise that might have helped him reason through it. He was deep inside the earth, and something down there already knew he was coming. Massive being. A trail camera mounted near a rocky hillside in 2002 recorded something early one morning that still hasn't been resolved. A massive dark figure stepped into the open without pausing, broad shoulders. Towering frame, fully upright. Some called it a bear, but the way it carried itself didn't support that easily. The grainy footage made confirmation impossible, which is exactly why the clip kept moving. Every time someone thought they had an answer, the quality denied them the last detail they needed. The debate has been running for over 2 decades without settling. Horned entity. Footage from 2002 showed something emerging from a cave entrance that resisted easy explanation. A tall figure with a cow-like face and large horns moved out from the opening, part of its body covered in what appeared to be cloth. The video's age made every detail harder to confirm, grain and fading doing what time usually does to inconvenient evidence. Some identified it immediately with mythical descriptions. Others felt the condition of the footage made any firm conclusion impossible. The figure stood at the threshold between darkness and open air, and the recording caught just enough to make certainty difficult in either direction. Mexico encounter. A family hiking in Mexico zoomed into a rocky mountainside and found a small cave opening with a humanoid figure slowly emerging from it. Once outside, it barely moved, seemingly watching the terrain below. The size was what stopped people. From that distance, it exceeded anything a normal human frame could explain. Viewers who studied the footage kept returning to old local legends, describing giants living deep inside the mountain caves of Mexico. The figure at that entrance seemed less like a discovery and more like a confirmation of something people had been saying for generations. Crouching being. An anonymous upload described a walk through the woods that ended badly. Moving through the bushes near a cave, the man came face to face with a pale figure crouching in an unnatural position, completely motionless in the dark. The stillness made it worse. No reaction, no movement, just that shape holding its position in the shadows. He ran without waiting. The whole encounter lasted only seconds, but it didn't leave him afterward. Something crouching that quietly in the dark near a cave entrance had clearly done it before. Aerial shapes. A commercial passenger filming from the window caught something unexpected far below. Across a vast, empty landscape, several large humanoid shapes moved slowly across open ground. From that altitude, their scale against the silent terrain was difficult to process. Zooming in didn't resolve anything. The outline stayed unclear, the movement unhurried. Nothing else in the surrounding landscape was in motion. Whatever was crossing that ground below was doing so without any awareness of being watched from above, which somehow made it harder to dismiss. Petrified formations. In the desert stretches of northern Mexico, rock formations rise from the ground in shapes that resist easy dismissal. Faces, arms, figures, detail that feels deliberate rather than incidental. Across multiple native cultures, including those of the Mississippi Valley, old accounts describe giant cannibalistic beings that once moved through the land.
There's one giant story that's interesting because it overlaps several cultures, native cultures, where you've got in like the Mississippi Valley, they have these Indian myths about